Imagine waiting through hours of ceremonies, arrivals, and formalities before the meal truly began. The hall is warm from 100 candles and a roaring fire, but your feet are cold inside thin leather shoes, and your stomach has been empty since morning. You cannot take your place until the right people have taken theirs. You cannot eat until the right dishes have passed. You smile because smiling is also a kind of work. Around you, conversation rises and falls in careful waves. Everyone seems relaxed. Few people actually are. The feast has not even begun, and already your back aches beneath stiff embroidery and tightly fitted sleeves. The gown looked magnificent in your chamber. Here, after hours of wearing it, it feels more like something you must endure. This wasn't indulgence, it was performance, carried out in a body that still had to survive the evening. Pottage of barley and pork. The first spoonful arrives later than you expected. By now, hunger has become something physical. The smell of roasting meat has drifted through the hall for hours. A thick, gray-brown stew simmered for hours in a kitchen 2 floors below the hall. Barley swollen soft, fat from the pork forming small golden circles across the broth. Pottage filled a household without using much meat. It used what was already available, stretched it, and made it last. Eaten slowly, in small mouthfuls, while watching who else was watching you eat. Reaching too quickly for another spoonful would be noticed, so you slow your hand and take another measured bite. Even hunger has rules here. Roasted swan. The swan is announced before it arrives. Heads turn, conversations pause. Servants step carefully aside to make room for the procession. Brought in whole, feathers reattached after cooking, skin glazed dark and tight. A spectacle more than a meal. The bird had likely been killed days earlier. Plucked, stuffed, and turned slowly on a spit until the kitchen boy's arms ached. Swan signaled wealth and royal favor more than flavor. It was tough, slightly gamey, often masked beneath heavy sauces of wine and spice. Many guests admired the swan more than they enjoyed eating it. Display mattered more than taste. By the time a slice finally reaches your plate, much of the anticipation has already passed. The swan was for looking at. The eating came afterward, almost as an afterthought. Boiled capon in almond milk. The capon arrives quietly. No murmurs, no display. Pale, soft, simmered slowly with ground almonds and a little sugar, thickened until it coated the meat like a film. Almond milk was used in place of dairy on fast days. The meat is tender enough that very little chewing is required. Dental problems were common even among the wealthy. You eat slowly, not because etiquette requires it this time, but because the soft capon is one of the few dishes that does not ask anything from you. It wasn't comfort exactly. It was simply something that didn't demand more effort. Frumenty with venison. The bowl feels heavier than the dishes that came before it. Earlier, your stomach had been empty. Now it feels caught somewhere between hunger and fullness. Cracked wheat boiled slowly in broth and spices until thick and golden. Venison stirred through in dark shredded pieces. Heavy, warming. Venison marked status. Hunting rights were closely tied to land, privilege, and law. Frumenty stretched it, allowing a relatively small amount of meat to fill a substantial dish. Served between other courses, often growing cold while guests waited for the proper order of service. Hunger, in fact, rarely decided anything at this table. You shift slightly on the bench, trying to ease an ache beginning in your lower back. Inside the hall, a meal is also patience. Marchpane subtlety. The marchpane attracts attention before anyone tastes it. Conversation slow, heads turn. Guests lean forward slightly as servants carry it through the hall. Not because you are hungry, because everyone else is looking. A sculpted shape, a castle, an animal, sometimes a coat of arms, built from ground almonds, sugar, and rosewater, pressed into molds and dried hard. Sugar was still rare enough to be a display of wealth on its own. It looked like generosity. It tasted faintly of how much had been spent to make a point. You find yourself adjusting a bracelet for what feels like the 3rd or 4th time that evening. Eel pie. The eel pie arrives without fanfare. No one pauses to admire it. Eels caught from rivers and waterways, skinned, chopped, baked into a pastry crust with butter, parsley, and a little vinegar. The crust often wasn't intended to be eaten at all. Eels were common throughout England and appeared on both humble and elite tables. The feast has begun to settle into a rhythm. A dish arrives, a dish disappears. Few people remembered the eel pie afterward. It did its job. Standing too early would attract attention. Remaining seated is often less about comfort than discipline. Spiced wine, Hippocras. By the time the Hippocras appears, the hall feels different from when the feast began. The excitement has faded. A cup is passed into your hands. Red wine warmed gently with cinnamon, ginger, and grains of paradise, strained through cloth and sweetened with sugar. Spices were costly enough that Hippocras itself was a statement. Sweet, warm, fragrant. Guests no longer sound excited. They sound tired. The candles have burned noticeably lower now, and the air feels heavier, carrying the scent of wax, smoke, wine, and damp wool. Many modern people imagine royal banquets as endless indulgence. The reality could be surprisingly uncomfortable. The food was abundant. Comfort was not. Brawn pressed boar's head. By the time the brawn reaches the table, appetite is no longer the most important thing in the room. Endurance is. Gray-pink slices, firm but faintly trembling. The head of a boar boiled for hours until the meat fell from the bone, then pressed into a mold with its own jellied broth until firm enough to be sliced. A noblewoman might take only a small sliver, eaten with bread, while trying not to think too closely about what it once was. The ritual matters more than the hunger it was meant to satisfy. Stewed pigeons and verjuice. By now, the feast has been underway so long that each new dish feels less like an arrival and more like part of a procession that refuses to end. The pigeons are small, their meat dark beneath a thin tart sauce. Stewed slowly in verjuice, the sour juice of unripe grapes, they offer something different from the richness that has dominated the evening. By this stage, many stomachs are already full. Appetite has become secondary to routine. The hall feels warmer than it did hours ago. Wax drips slowly down candles that seemed untouched when the evening began. What remains is patience, waiting for its conclusion. Wafers and comfits. At last, the final course begins to appear. The servants begin clearing larger platters. Thin, crisp wafers, baked between iron plates over the fire, are served alongside small sugared seeds and spices. Comfits meant to be eaten slowly, almost absent-mindedly. A gentle ending rather than a grand finale. By now, many noblewomen have stopped thinking about the feast itself. The bench feels harder than it did hours ago. The jewels feel heavier. What began as anticipation has slowly become endurance. Conversation begins breaking into smaller groups. The feast is finally beginning to release its hold on the room. By the end of the banquet, many noblewomen had eaten far less than modern guests might imagine, because ceremony left little room for comfort. Hours of sitting, watching, waiting, and maintaining appearances could be more exhausting than the meal itself. The food was abundant, the spectacle was magnificent, but comfort was scarce. A royal banquet was never really about the food. It was about rank, patience, and the careful performance expected of everyone present. The swan displayed wealth, the marchpane displayed luxury, the Hippocras displayed generosity. They were watched almost as carefully as the feast itself. What remains is the stiffness in your back, the dull ache in your feet from shoes that have felt too narrow for hours. At last, the banquet begins to break apart. Only now are you finally free to stand. For a moment, your legs hesitate beneath you after so many hours in the same position, and only then do you realize how tired you are.